It's 4:47 a.m., and a corrections officer is walking down a row of cells with a clipboard in his hand. This happens 4 times a night, in every maximum security prison in the country. It's called a count, and most of the time, it's the most boring part of the job. He shines his flashlight into cell 114. He counts the shape under the blanket. He moves to 115, then 116. Then he stops. Something about 114 doesn't look right. He walks back. He pulls the blanket away. There's no one there. Just rolled up clothing, shaped like a body, tucked under a sheet. An inmate is missing. And in this exact moment, before a single alarm has sounded, before a single phone call has been made, a machine that most people never think about begins to wake up. To understand what happens next, you first need to understand something that sounds almost too simple to matter. Prisons are built around counting, not watching, not guarding exactly. Counting. At any given moment, a facility with 2,000 inmates has to be able to answer one question with total certainty. Where is every single one of them right now? That number is checked constantly, on a schedule, cell by cell, block by block, shift by shift. It's not glamorous work, and for the officers who do it, it can feel almost mechanical. But that repetition is the entire point. A count that happens like clockwork is what makes an irregularity impossible to miss, because the moment the number doesn't match, everything else in the building already knows how to respond. Not because anyone decided that in the moment, because it was decided years ago, written into a manual, and drilled into every officer on staff until it became reflex. That's what's about to happen to cell 114. The officer doesn't try to solve this himself. His first move isn't to search the block, or to run outside, or to check the fence line. His first move is to radio it in as an unconfirmed count discrepancy, a phrase that sounds bureaucratic, almost deliberately unemotional, because that's exactly what it's designed to be. Prisons are engineered to avoid false alarms. An inmate could be in the infirmary, he could be in the shower block on an approved pass, he could simply be under a second blanket that confused the count. So before anything else happens, a second officer is sent to recount, not because anyone doubts the first officer, but because a full facility-wide alert is an enormous, expensive, disruptive thing to trigger, and no system wants to trigger it by accident. This recount takes somewhere between 2 and 5 minutes, and it's in this narrow window, while 2 officers are quietly rechecking a single cell, that the entire fate of the next hour is decided. The recount comes back the same. Cell 114 is empty. There is no explanation on file. This is the trigger point. The moment the system stops asking, "Is something wrong?" and starts asking, "What do we do about it?" And what happens next is not improvised. The officer doesn't call the news. He doesn't even call the police first. He calls his shift supervisor, using a phrase that exists in almost every American correctional facility. Code red, unaccounted inmate. 2 words, and an entire building changes state. In the first minute after code red is declared, the facility does something that looks from the outside almost like nothing at all. It goes still. Every door that can be locked, locks. Every inmate who is in a common area is moved back to a cell. Movement across the facility, to the yard, to the cafeteria, to work assignments, simply stops mid-motion wherever it happens to be. This is called a facility lockdown, and its purpose has nothing to do with catching the missing inmate directly. Its purpose is to freeze everyone else, because right now, staff don't just have one open question, where is inmate 114? They have a second, more urgent one hiding underneath it. Is anyone helping him? A missing inmate isn't just a security failure, it's a live variable, and the fastest way to control a live variable is to stop everything around it from moving. By minute 5, something is happening that most people would never picture. A phone tree. The warden is called, not woken by an assistant with a gentle knock, called directly at whatever hour it is, because in this specific chain of events, rank determines who gets the phone call first and how fast. At the same time, a second call goes out to the agency that governs correctional escapes in that state, and depending on the facility, to state police. This might seem redundant. Why call 2 different organizations for the same emergency? Because a prison on its own has almost no power once an inmate crosses its perimeter. Its authority, its weapons, its use of force policies exists specifically inside the fence line. The instant a person is outside that line, the facility, legally and practically, becomes almost a bystander, which means the response can't stay internal for long. It has to widen, fast. 10 minutes in, and the facility has done quietly 2 things at once. It has locked its own population down, and it has started handing the problem to someone with a much bigger toolkit. This is where most people assume the drama begins. Search dogs, helicopters, roadblocks. But there's a step before that, a quieter one, and it's arguably the most important decision of the entire hour. Someone has to figure out how much time has already been lost, because the count that discovered the empty cell wasn't the moment the inmate left, it was simply the moment someone noticed he was gone. And those two moments are almost never the same. This is where investigators reach for something that sounds almost too simple to be useful: the last confirmed sighting. When was inmate 114 last seen, provably by a specific person in a specific place? If the last verified sighting was during the 10 p.m. count and the missing count happened at 4:47 a.m., that's not a 5-minute head start. That's a nearly 7-hour window, and that single number, the size of the head start, quietly reshapes everything that happens for the rest of the hour. A 5-minute head start means the inmate is probably still close, maybe even still inside the perimeter fence, and a tight, aggressive search makes sense. A 7-hour head start means he could be almost anywhere within 100 miles, and searching the yard with dogs at that point isn't just unlikely to help, it actively wastes the only resource that matters now: time. So before a single dog is deployed, before a single helicopter takes off, someone has to answer a quiet, unglamorous question: how big is our circle? By the 15-minute mark, that circle starts becoming real, on paper and then on the ground. Investigators draw a radius around the prison based on how much time has passed and what's physically possible to travel in that time, on foot, by vehicle, or by any transportation the inmate might realistically access. That radius becomes the search zone, and state police begin setting up something the public rarely thinks about in these terms. Not a manhunt at first, but a perimeter. Patrol cars are positioned at intersections, on-ramps, and rural crossroads along the outer edge of that circle, not to chase, but to filter. The idea isn't to find one person inside 100 square miles, it's to make that 100 square miles harder to leave. This is a detail that surprises a lot of people. For the first phase of almost every escape response, the priority isn't capture, it's containment. You don't chase the person you can't see, you shrink the space they're in until you can. At the same time, roughly 20 minutes in, a second, quieter operation begins that has nothing to do with fences or radios at all. It's a record search. Someone pulls the inmate's file, his sentence, his conviction, whether he's considered violent, whether he has any documented history of specific targets, an ex-partner, a witness who testified against him, a rival before his incarceration. This step exists because the response to an escape isn't uniform. A non-violent offender nearing the end of a short sentence gets treated differently than someone serving decades for a violent crime, not because one matters less than the other, but because the level of public danger changes what kind of resources get committed and how urgently. This is also the moment someone begins a list that will matter enormously within the hour: known associates, family addresses, and anyone the inmate has had contact with recently, whether by mail, by phone, or by visitation log. Because if this person had help, and many escapes involve at least some outside assistance, that help almost always traces back to someone already sitting in a file cabinet. By half past the hour, the picture inside the command center has changed completely from where it started. What began as two officers quietly rechecking a single cell has become a coordinated response involving the prison's own emergency team, state police, and, depending on the severity, federal law enforcement. Because escaping federal custody or crossing state lines while a fugitive can trigger jurisdiction that extends far beyond any single police department. And now a decision has to be made that sounds administrative, but is actually one of the most consequential choices in the entire response. Do we tell the public yet? This might seem like an obvious yes. Someone dangerous is loose. Shouldn't people know immediately? But law enforcement has to weigh something uncomfortable. The moment the public knows, so does the escapee, if he has any access to a phone, a radio, or another person. A public alert can genuinely help. Extra eyes, tip lines, a community on alert. But it can also collapse a quiet, controlled search into a chaotic one, sending an already alerted person deeper into hiding faster before the perimeter is even fully in place. So there's a careful, often uncomfortable balance being struck here, usually somewhere between the 30 and 45-minute mark. Officials weigh the size of the search radius, the danger level of the individual, and how complete the perimeter already is, against the risk of waiting even a few more minutes to get the public involved. There is no universal answer. Every escape is its own equation.
Around the 40-minute
mark. If the inmate still hasn't been found, a different kind of resource usually enters the picture. Dogs. Search and rescue and tracking canines are trained to follow a scent trail from a specific starting point, usually the cell itself or the last physical location the inmate is confirmed to have touched. But dogs have a limitation most people don't realize. A scent trail degrades. Wind, rain, and simple time all work against it, which is exactly why that earlier, quieter question, how big is our head start, mattered so much. A dog given a 5-minute-old trail can be extraordinarily effective. A dog given a 7-hour-old trail, crossed by hundreds of other footprints and vehicles, is fighting a battle that's already mostly lost. This is also often when a helicopter joins the search, not because it's dramatic, but because thermal imaging can do something ground teams physically can't: scan enormous stretches of open or wooded terrain in minutes instead of hours. By 50 minutes, something has usually happened that reshapes the entire investigation. Whether or not the inmate has been caught, a pattern starts to emerge. Maybe a vehicle is reported stolen from a house near the prison's outer fence. Maybe a resident along the search radius reports someone matching the description, asking for a ride, or taking clothing off a laundry line. Individually, these are small, almost forgettable reports, but inside a command center actively tracking a live escape, they become data points on a map, and a map, given enough points, starts to suggest a direction. This is the moment the operation usually shifts from containment to pursuit. The circle that was drawn 20 minutes earlier stops being a static boundary and starts narrowing toward wherever the pattern points. And by the time the hour closes, the situation has almost always resolved into one of two outcomes. Either the perimeter held, the dogs or the reports narrowed the search fast enough, and the inmate is back in custody before the sun is much higher in the sky, which is statistically the more common outcome. Most escapes end in recapture within hours, not days, precisely because of everything that happened in that first 60 minutes: the fast confirmation, the immediate containment, the widening jurisdiction, the careful sequencing of dogs, air support, and public notice. Or the trail has genuinely gone cold. The head start was simply too large to close in an hour, and the case shifts into a longer, multi-day manhunt, at which point an entirely different set of protocols, involving federal marshals and extended surveillance, takes over from here. But notice what determined which of those two paths this story takes. It wasn't luck, it was sequencing. It's easy to imagine an escape as a single dramatic event: a fence climbed, a gate slipped through, a chase across open country. But what actually happens is something quieter, and in its own way more impressive: a series of small, disciplined decisions made in a specific order by people who mostly never see each other, each one narrowing the odds a little further than the last. An officer who trusts a recount instead of raising a false alarm, a supervisor who locks down a building before anyone knows why, a records clerk pulling a visitation log at 4 in the morning, a dispatcher deciding exactly how wide to draw a circle on a map. None of these moments look like drama. Together, they are the entire reason most escapes end quietly, within an hour, in a place nobody ever hears about. The system was never designed to be exciting. It was designed to be fast, ordered, and almost boring in its precision. And that, it turns out, is exactly why it works.